everyone, welcome back to our channel. My name is Sophia, and today I want to talk about something that quietly affects so many people every single day. Not loud failure, not public embarrassment, not even fear itself. I want to talk about the habit of thinking too much and saying too little. The title of today's video is simple: Stop thinking, start talking. And before you misunderstand me, I am not saying speak without care. I am not saying say everything that comes to your mind. I am not saying be careless with your words. What I am saying is this: so many dreams stay locked inside people because they keep rehearsing life in their head instead of living it out loud. So many good ideas disappear because someone keeps waiting for the perfect moment. So many relationships break down because nobody says what they really feel. So many opportunities are missed because someone was too busy overthinking the first sentence. And if that sounds like you, I want you to stay with me, because this video is not just about speaking. It is about confidence. It is about clarity. It is about courage. It is about becoming the kind of person who no longer hides behind endless thoughts. It is about learning how to use your voice before life moves on without you. I want to be honest with you from the start. I know what it feels like to sit there with 1,000 thoughts in your head and still say nothing. I know what it feels like to write the perfect message in your mind and then delete it before sending. I know what it feels like to see the right moment pass because you are waiting for the perfect words. I know what it feels like to think, maybe later, maybe tomorrow, maybe when I feel more ready. But the truth is, the longer you wait, the heavier it gets. The longer you stay silent, the more your thoughts begin to feel bigger than your life. And eventually, silence becomes a habit. Then, hesitation becomes a personality. And before you know it, you are no longer just thinking. You are trapped. Let me tell you something important. A thought is only powerful when it becomes action. An idea is only valuable when it becomes expression. A feeling is only understood when it is spoken clearly. A dream is only real when you start giving it a voice. That is why I want to say this very clearly today. Stop thinking, start talking. Not because thought is bad. Thought is necessary, but thought without expression becomes a prison. Imagine you are in a beautiful city like New York. Everyone around you is moving fast. Cars are rushing, people are speaking, traffic lights are changing, businesses are opening, voices are everywhere. If you stand still in the middle of all that energy, lost in your own head, the city will not stop for you. Life does not pause while you prepare the perfect sentence. Life keeps moving. Maybe you are in Los Angeles, where people are creating, filming, building, and chasing big dreams every day. Maybe you are in Chicago, where people work hard, speak boldly, and carry real stories in their voices. Maybe you are in Houston, Atlanta, Miami, Seattle, Boston, Dallas, or a small town somewhere in the United States where the streets are quiet, but the pressure inside your mind is loud. No matter where you are, the lesson is the same. The world rewards action, and action often begins with speaking. There are people who can think all day and still never tell the truth. There are people who can plan all week and still never make the call. There are people who can imagine their future in detail and still never introduce themselves to the opportunity standing right in front of them. And sometimes, the only thing standing between you and change is one honest conversation. One brave sentence, one clear voice, one moment where you stop running the conversation in your head and finally let it out into the real world. Maybe you need to say, I am not okay. Maybe you need to say, I need help. Maybe you need to say, I like this person. Maybe you need to say, I disagree. Maybe you need to say, I want a better life. Maybe you need to say, I am ready. Maybe you need to say, I am not where I want to be, but I am willing to grow. That is the beginning of change, not perfection, not overthinking, not waiting until you have no fear left. The beginning of change is honesty, and honesty sounds like a voice. So let us talk about why people stay silent. A lot of times, people do not stay quiet because they have nothing to say. They stay quiet because they are afraid of what happens after they speak. They fear being judged. They fear sounding silly. They fear rejection. They fear being misunderstood. They fear saying the wrong thing and losing control. They fear that once the words come out, there is no taking them back. And yes, that fear is real. But here's the part we do not talk about enough. Silence can damage you too. Silence can make you invisible. Silence can make your ideas rot inside your own mind. Silence can make your emotions grow heavy. Silence can make you look calm on the outside while you are falling apart inside. Silence can create distance in relationships. Silence can turn simple problems into giant ones. Silence can make you watch other people live the life you wanted because they were brave enough to speak before you were. That is why talking matters. Speaking is not just about communication, it is about participation. When you speak, you enter your own life. When you speak, you stop being a spectator. When you speak, you give shape to what you believe. Think about the people you admire. The confident speaker in a meeting, the friend who knows how to express feelings clearly, the leader who can stand in front of a crowd and speak with calm strength. The person who can ask for what they need without apologizing for existing. What makes them powerful is not that they never feel nervous. It is that they do not let nervousness own their voice. They learned that confidence is not something you wait for. Confidence is something you build by speaking anyway. You speak while your hands shake. You speak while your voice is not perfect. You speak while you are still healing. You speak while your heart is racing. You speak while your mind is saying, "What if I mess up?" Because the truth is, messing up is part of learning. Silence teaches you almost nothing. Speaking teaches you everything. Every time you speak, you learn who you are. You learn how people respond. You learn how to correct yourself. You learn how to be more honest. You learn how to be more direct. You learn how to trust your own voice. And trust me, that matters more than you think. Many people are not suffering because they lack intelligence. They are suffering because they cannot turn intelligence into communication. They know what they feel. They know what they want. They know what they need, but they cannot say it. And when you cannot say it, life becomes confusing. A relationship becomes confusing. A job becomes confusing. A dream becomes confusing. Even self-respect becomes confusing. Because how can the world understand you if you never let it hear you? How can anyone support you if you hide your reality behind, "I'm fine"? How can someone love the real you if they only ever see the quiet version that never speaks up? Sophia is going to be very direct with you right now. Your voice is not a decoration. Your voice is a tool. Your voice is a bridge. Your voice is a door. Your voice can open conversations that change your life. Your voice can protect your boundaries. Your voice can explain your dreams. Your voice can bring you peace. Your voice can heal misunderstandings. Your voice can build your future, but only if you use it. Let me give you a few real-life examples. Imagine someone in San Diego who has a job but hates it. Every morning, they wake up tired, sit in traffic, and think about how unhappy they are. They tell themselves they will look for something better later, but later keeps turning into later. Months pass, then years. Nothing changes because they never speak to anyone about what they want. They never ask for help. They never tell themselves the truth out loud. They just keep thinking. Or imagine someone in Philadelphia who has a great idea for a business. They know it could help people. They have the plan in their head. They can picture the logo, the service, the message. But they never tell anyone. They never start. They never ask questions. They keep refining the idea in their mind until it becomes a fantasy instead of a real business. Or imagine a student in Austin who knows the answer in class but stays quiet every time because they are afraid of being wrong. So the teacher keeps calling on other people. Over time, the student starts believing they are less smart than they really are, not because they lack ability, but because they never practice speaking. This happens everywhere. In homes, in schools, in offices, in friendships, in families, in relationships, in cities full of noise, and in towns full of silence. And the biggest tragedy is that a lot of people think they have a thinking problem when they actually have a speaking problem. They think, I need more time. No, maybe I need more confidence. No, maybe I need more clarity. Sometimes, yes, but many times, clarity comes after speaking, not before. You do not always think your way into clarity. Sometimes you talk your way into it. You do not always discover what you feel by sitting alone with your thoughts for hours. Sometimes you discover it by saying it out loud and hearing it for the first time. That is why journaling helps. That is why honest conversations help. That is why speaking to the right person helps. That is why recording your own voice can help. That is why saying, "This is what I am thinking," can change the entire direction of your day. There is power in naming things, power in telling the truth, power in making the invisible visible. When you say, "I feel lost," you can finally begin to find your way. When you say, "I am scared," you can finally begin to face it. When you say, "I need direction," you can finally begin to receive it. When you say, "I want more from my life," you can finally begin to build more. And that is why I am asking you today to stop waiting for your confidence to magically appear. Start with your voice. Start small. Start imperfectly. Start before you feel fully ready. Say good morning with more energy. Ask the question you keep avoiding. Make the phone call. Speak up in the meeting. Tell your friend how you really feel. Tell your family what you need. Tell yourself the truth. Because every time you speak, you train your mind to stop shrinking. Now let us talk about overthinking, because that is a huge part of this problem. Overthinking makes everything feel dangerous. A simple message becomes a huge risk. A simple conversation becomes a disaster in your imagination. A simple opinion becomes a battle. A simple request becomes embarrassment. Your mind starts creating hundreds of possible outcomes, and most of them are worst-case scenarios. What if they laugh? What if they say no? What if I sound stupid? What if I am not prepared? What if I regret it? What if everything falls apart? But listen closely. Most of the pain you imagine never actually happens. And even when something uncomfortable does happen, it is usually not the end of the world. You survive awkward moments. You survive rejection. You survive imperfect conversations. You survive being misunderstood sometimes. You survive not having all the answers. And every time you survive, you become less afraid. That is how growth works. Not by avoiding discomfort, by moving through it. I want to tell you something that may free you. You do not need the perfect words. You need honest words. You do not need the best sentence. You need the real sentence. You do not need to sound like everyone else. You need to sound like yourself. That is where your power lives. And when your voice becomes honest, it becomes strong. There is also something beautiful that happens when you speak clearly. People stop guessing. Misunderstandings reduce. Relationships become healthier. Work becomes smoother. Your own mind becomes calmer. Because a lot of stress comes from unspoken things, unspoken expectations, unspoken hurt, unspoken fear, unspoken dreams, unspoken resentment, unspoken love, unspoken needs. When you bring words to what is hidden, pressure starts to release. And you breathe again. This is why communication is not just a social skill. It is an emotional skill. It is a life skill. It is a survival skill. The person who can express themselves well often has an easier time asking for help, setting boundaries, building trust, and finding support. And let me be clear, speaking does not mean becoming loud for no reason. It means becoming clear. It means being able to say what matters when it matters. It means respecting your own inner world enough to give it a voice. Maybe you have spent years being the quiet one, the one who listens, the one who waits, the one who thinks deeply and speaks rarely. There is nothing wrong with being thoughtful. Thoughtful people are needed. Quiet people are needed. But there is a difference between being quiet and being silenced. There is a difference between being thoughtful and being trapped. There is a difference between choosing your words wisely and never choosing to use them at all. I am speaking to the part of you that has been holding back, the part of you that knows it is time, the part of you that is tired of being invisible, the part of you that is tired of rehearsing life instead of living it. That part of you is ready. Maybe not fully, maybe not perfectly, but ready enough, and that is enough to begin. So what do you do now? You start with one conversation, one sentence, one message, one honest admission, one brave question, one clear boundary, one expression of truth. That is all. You do not have to change your whole life in one day. You only have to stop letting fear make the decisions for your mouth. Speak, because your future may depend on one voice-filled moment you keep postponing. Speak, because the right people cannot support the version of you they never get to hear. Speak, because your idea, your feeling, your desire, your boundary, your dream, your truth, they all deserve air. And once you begin, it gets easier. Not instantly, not magically, but steadily. You speak once, then twice, then 10 times. Then one day, you realize something amazing. You are no longer the person who only thinks. You are the person who communicates. You are the person who participates. You are the person who shows up with clarity. You are the person who uses their voice. And that changes everything. So let me leave you with this. If you keep thinking, life will keep passing. If you keep waiting, courage will keep slipping away. If you keep silencing yourself, the world will keep missing your light. But if you start talking, something beautiful begins. Confidence grows, connection grows, opportunity grows, healing grows, truth grows, and you grow. But before we move on, I want you to sit with one very important truth. A lot of people are not struggling because they have nothing valuable inside them. They are struggling because they never let that value come out. They keep it hidden. They keep it protected. They keep it locked behind fear, overthinking, and self-doubt. And every time they do that, life gets a little smaller. Their world becomes smaller. Their relationships become smaller. Their confidence becomes smaller. Their opportunities become smaller. Not because they are not capable, but because they are not speaking. And speaking is what gives your life shape. You may have dreams that feel too big to say out loud. You may have feelings you think are too complicated to explain. You may have opinions you are afraid people will reject. You may have questions you are embarrassed to ask. You may have a truth inside you that has been sitting there for years, waiting for the right moment. But here's the truth. There may never be a perfect moment. There may never be a perfect audience. There may never be a perfect feeling of readiness. And that is okay, because courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is speaking while fear is still in the room. Courage is choosing honesty over comfort. Courage is choosing clarity over confusion. Courage is saying the thing that your heart has been carrying for too long. I want to talk about something else now. Sometimes people think speaking is only for big moments. A big speech, a big interview, a big confession, a big argument, a big presentation. But real communication happens in the small moments too. It happens when you tell the cashier to have a good day. It happens when you introduce yourself clearly. It happens when you ask a question instead of pretending to know everything. It happens when you say, "I don't agree." It happens when you say, "That hurt me." It happens when you say, "I need time." It happens when you say, "I am proud of myself." It happens when you say, "I want more." It happens when you say, "I am learning." These small moments matter because they shape how you move through the world. If you cannot speak in the small moments, the big moments will feel even harder. That is why practice matters, not perfection. Practice. Practice speaking with honesty. Practice speaking with kindness. Practice speaking with confidence. Practice speaking without apologizing for your existence. Practice speaking without shrinking your truth to make other people more comfortable. Now, let me pause here and say something directly to the person watching this who feels shy, nervous, quiet, or socially awkward. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are not less intelligent because you struggle to speak. You are not weak because your voice shakes. You are not empty because you need time to gather your thoughts. You are simply learning how to unlock yourself. And that takes time, but it also takes action, because no amount of thinking will replace the growth that happens when you speak. You cannot build confidence only by imagining it. You build confidence by using your voice and surviving the experience, then doing it again, and again, and again. That is how a person changes. Not by becoming someone else, by becoming more of who they are. Let's talk about fear for a moment. Fear loves silence. Fear grows when you keep everything inside. Fear becomes stronger when you keep replaying conversations in your mind instead of having them in real life. Fear tells you that your voice is too small. Fear tells you that people will reject you. Fear tells you that it is safer to stay quiet, but fear is not always telling the truth. Fear is loud, but it is not wise. Fear is convincing, but it is not always correct. And if you believe fear every time, you will slowly disappear behind it. That is why speaking is an act of rebellion. When you speak, you rebel against the voice that says you are not enough. When you speak, you rebel against the thought that says your opinion does not matter. When you speak, you rebel against the fear that says silence is safer than truth. And that rebellion can change your life. I want you to imagine a young woman in Brooklyn, standing outside a coffee shop, wanting to tell someone how she feels, but holding back because she thinks she will be judged. I want you to imagine a man in Dallas, in a meeting, with a strong idea that could improve the project, but he stays quiet because he thinks someone else will say it better. I want you to imagine a student in Atlanta wanting to ask for help but afraid of looking weak. I want you to imagine a mother in Phoenix carrying stress for months because she never tells anyone what she needs. I want you to imagine a worker in Detroit, full of talent, but so used to staying quiet that nobody around them knows what they are capable of. These are not small things. These are the hidden moments where life changes or stays the same. And sometimes the difference between the two is one sentence, one honest sentence. That is all. There is also a powerful thing that happens when you begin speaking more clearly. You start understanding yourself better, because many people think they know what they feel, but they have never actually said it out loud. They feel pressure, but call it stress. They feel sadness, but call it tiredness. They feel loneliness, but call it being busy. They feel anger, but call it frustration. They feel fear, but call it hesitation. They feel love, but call it confusion. They feel ambition, but call it just a thought. Words help you tell the truth to yourself, and when you tell the truth to yourself, everything becomes more manageable. Not easy, but manageable. That is important, because you do not heal what you refuse to name. You do not solve what you refuse to admit. You do not grow where you refuse to be honest. So start naming your reality. Start saying what is true, even if your voice is quiet, even if your voice shakes, even if you have to pause and think, even if the sentence is imperfect. Speak the truth anyway. There are people who have spent years waiting for others to understand them without ever explaining themselves. That is a painful place to live. Because people are not mind readers. Friends are not mind readers. Partners are not mind readers. Coworkers are not mind readers. Family members are not mind readers. And even you are not always fully clear on your own heart until you hear yourself speak. So speak. Speak with care. Speak with purpose. Speak with respect. But speak. Now let me say something about relationships, because this matters deeply here. A lot of relationships do not fall apart because of one huge betrayal. They fall apart because of too many unsaid things, too many silent disappointments, too many assumptions, too many "I thought you knew," too many "I didn't want to bring it up," too many "it's fine" when it was never fine, too many people who were thinking but not talking. And silence in relationships often creates distance faster than conflict does. Because at least conflict is honest. Conflict says, something is happening here. Silence says, nothing is happening here, while everything is actually breaking apart. That is why healthy communication is one of the greatest forms of love. When you tell someone how you feel, you give the relationship a chance to grow. When you set a boundary, you give the relationship a chance to become healthier. When you ask for clarity, you prevent confusion from becoming resentment. When you speak with honesty, you invite truth into the room. And truth is what mature connection is built on. Let me be very clear. You do not need to be loud to be strong. You do not need to dominate every conversation. You do not need to speak just to fill silence. You do not need to perform confidence. You only need to become willing to speak up, willing to ask, willing to admit, willing to express, willing to say, this matters to me. That willingness is powerful, and it is available to you right now. Another thing I want to talk about is the way we speak to ourselves. Because sometimes the problem is not that you do not talk enough. Sometimes the problem is that the only voice you hear is cruel. You say things to yourself you would never say to another human being. You call yourself stupid. You call yourself awkward. You call yourself boring. You call yourself difficult. You call yourself a failure before the world even gets a chance to. And that inner language shapes your outer behavior. If your self-talk is always negative, your voice in public will feel smaller. If your self-talk is always afraid, your actions will feel weaker. If your self-talk is always critical, your speaking will feel unsafe. So speaking starts inside too. Talk to yourself with more honesty and more kindness. Say, I am learning. Say, I can improve. Say, I do not need to be perfect to be heard. Say, my thoughts matter. Say, my voice deserves space. Say, I am allowed to take up room. That is not arrogance. That is health. That is not ego. That is confidence. And confidence is not pretending you have no fear. Confidence is trusting that your voice is worth hearing even while fear exists. I want to give you something practical now, not as a list, but as a way of living. The next time you are afraid to speak, do not wait for the fear to vanish. Take one breath, then say the sentence anyway. The next time you want to express your idea, do not polish it for so long that it dies. Say it. The next time you want to ask a question, do not assume everyone else knows more than you. Ask it. The next time you need to tell the truth, do not bury it under politeness. Say it with respect, but say it clearly. The next time you are about to send a message and delete it for the 10th time, stop and ask yourself whether you are editing for clarity or hiding from courage. That question alone can change everything. Because some people are not confused. They are simply afraid. And once you admit that, you can begin to move. Now, I want to talk about growth. Growth is not always dramatic. Sometimes growth looks like speaking one sentence you would have avoided before. Sometimes growth looks like telling someone no without guilt. Sometimes growth looks like asking for help without shame. Sometimes growth looks like introducing yourself without shrinking. Sometimes growth looks like saying what you want instead of hoping someone guesses. Sometimes growth looks like telling the truth even when your voice is soft. That is real growth. Not just being busy. Not just thinking deeply. Not just planning endlessly. Real growth happens when your inner life and outer life begin to match. When what you feel and what you say stop being enemies. When your thoughts no longer live in prison. When your voice finally joins your life, and once that happens, you begin to notice something else. People respond differently to you, not because you became someone else, but because you became clearer. They understand you more. They trust you more. They know where you stand. They know what you mean. They know what matters to you. And that is beautiful, because being misunderstood is exhausting. But being understood begins with being willing to speak. I want to remind you of something simple and strong. You are not here to be invisible. You are not here to live quietly inside your own mind while the rest of the world moves on without your input. You are not here to carry your emotions like a secret burden. You are not here to keep delaying the life you want because you are scared of the sound of your own voice. You are here to live, and living requires expression. So let the voice come out. Let the truth come out. Let the idea come out. Let the feeling come out. Let the boundary come out. Let the dream come out, and when it does, do not apologize for it. Own it, because this is your life, your mind, your heart, your message, your moment. And no one else can speak for you the way you can. That is why stop thinking, start talking is not just a catchy phrase. It is a mindset. It is a decision. It is a way of taking your life back from hesitation. It is a way of stepping out of your own shadow. It is a way of becoming visible in your own story. And Sophia wants you to remember this clearly. Your voice is not too late. Your voice is not too weak. Your voice is not too small. Your voice is not too awkward. Your voice is not too much. Your voice is exactly what you have been given for a reason. Use it. Let it grow. Let it tremble if it must. Let it learn. Let it heal. Let it lead. And now I want to go even deeper, because this is where many people really struggle. They do not just have a speaking problem. They have a self-belief problem. They do not speak because somewhere inside they have already decided that their words are not important enough. They think other people are smarter. They think other people are more interesting. They think other people are more confident. They think other people deserve the spotlight more than they do. So they hold back. They stay quiet. They let other voices fill the space. And the more they do that, the more they begin to believe their silence is normal. But silence is not always peace. Sometimes silence is surrender. Sometimes silence is fear wearing a calm face. Sometimes silence is a habit built from old pain. Maybe someone laughed at you once. Maybe you were interrupted too many times. Maybe you were told to be quiet too often. Maybe your opinion was ignored. Maybe you were made to feel small. Maybe you learned that speaking up was risky. And if that is your story, I want to say this clearly. You can unlearn that. You are not stuck with the voice you had before. You are not doomed to remain the quiet version of yourself forever. You can become someone who speaks with honesty and strength. You can become someone who trusts their own thoughts. You can become someone who says what needs to be said. It starts with one choice: the choice to stop treating your voice like a problem. Your voice is not a problem. Your voice is a path to understanding, a path to connection, a path to confidence, a path to healing, a path to freedom. And once you see your voice that way, everything begins to change. Now, I want to talk about a mistake many people make. They think good communication means saying the most impressive thing. They think they have to sound smart. They think they have to sound polished. They think they have to have perfect grammar, perfect timing, perfect delivery, perfect confidence. But real communication is not about performance. It is about presence. It is about being real enough to be understood. It is about being honest enough to be trusted. It is about being clear enough to be heard. You do not need to sound like a professional speaker to matter. You only need to speak like a human being who is telling the truth. That is enough. More than enough. And that is where a lot of people get free. Because once they stop trying to sound impressive, they start sounding authentic. And authenticity is powerful. Authenticity makes people listen. Authenticity makes people feel safe. Authenticity makes connection possible. So if you have been waiting to become the right version of yourself before speaking, stop. That version is already inside you. It does not need to be built from scratch. It just needs room to breathe. Let me bring this closer to real life again. Imagine a young woman in Los Angeles who wants to start a creative project, maybe a podcast, maybe a business, maybe a YouTube channel, but she keeps saying, "I need more time to figure it out." Imagine a student in Boston who understands the lesson but never raises their hand. Imagine a man in Houston who knows his job is draining him, but never tells anyone he wants a change. Imagine a mother in Orlando who is emotionally exhausted but keeps saying, "I'm fine," because she does not want to burden anyone. Imagine a teenager in San Jose who has opinions, dreams, and feelings, but no one around them has ever created space for their voice. These people are not weak. They are not lazy. They are not broken. They are simply carrying too much inside. And when too much stays inside for too long, it becomes heavy. That is why speaking is not just communication. It is release. It is relief. It is relief from pressure, relief from confusion, relief from pretending, relief from the exhausting job of acting like everything is okay when it is not. And once you begin to speak, You begin to breathe differently. You begin to stand differently. You begin to think differently. You begin to see that your life does not need to be lived in silence. I want to say something to the person who is listening and thinking, "This sounds good, but I am just not the type of person who talks much." Maybe that is true right now, but identity is not always permanent. People change. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to become more expressive. You are allowed to become more direct. You are allowed to become more comfortable with your own sound. You are allowed to become someone who does not disappear in conversations. You are allowed to become someone who says, "Actually, I have something to add." You are allowed to become someone who says, "I do not agree." You are allowed to become someone who says, "This is how I feel." You are allowed to become someone who speaks with kindness and confidence. And I know this can feel uncomfortable at first. Growth usually does, but discomfort is not danger. Sometimes discomfort is simply proof that you are leaving an old version of yourself behind. Now, let us talk about something even deeper: the danger of waiting too long. When people keep waiting to speak, they do not just lose opportunities. They sometimes lose parts of themselves. A dream that stays unspoken becomes smaller. A feeling that stays unspoken becomes heavier. A truth that stays unspoken becomes painful. A desire that stays unspoken becomes frustration. A boundary that stays unspoken becomes resentment. A compliment that stays unspoken becomes regret. A confession that stays unspoken becomes distance. This is why timing matters, but not in the way people think. It is not about finding the perfect time. It is about not waiting until silence causes damage. There are words that should be spoken kindly, but sooner. There are truths that should be shared gently, but clearly. There are feelings that should not be buried under endless thinking, because thinking can help you prepare. But speaking is what moves life forward. And if you never move, then all your preparation just becomes a private performance. That is a sad way to live. So today, I want to invite you into a different way. A simpler way. A braver way. A truer way. The next time your mind begins to overanalyze everything, ask yourself this: what am I avoiding by thinking about it instead of saying it? That question can uncover a lot. Maybe you are avoiding rejection. Maybe you are avoiding embarrassment. Maybe you are avoiding responsibility. Maybe you are avoiding vulnerability. Maybe you are avoiding the risk of being seen. But being seen is part of living. Being heard is part of living. Being known is part of living. And if you keep hiding, life will keep feeling like it belongs to everyone else. Not to you. Not fully, not deeply, not honestly. So I want to encourage you to practice speaking in ordinary moments. Do not wait for the perfect, dramatic scene. Practice in everyday life. Practice introducing yourself with confidence. Practice asking questions without apologizing. Practice giving your opinion calmly. Practice sharing what you need. Practice saying thank you with sincerity. Practice saying no when you mean no. Practice saying yes when your heart is ready. Because every little moment is training, and each time you speak, you become more familiar with your own voice. Let me also remind you that not every conversation has to be perfect to be useful. Some conversations are awkward, some are messy, some are emotional, some are short, some are misunderstood, some do not go the way you hoped. That does not mean speaking was a mistake. It means communication is a process, and processes are not failures just because they are not flawless. Sometimes the best thing you can do is say it respectfully and let the outcome be what it is. You are not responsible for controlling every response. You are responsible for being honest. You are responsible for being clear. You are responsible for telling the truth in the best way you can. After that, the rest is not fully yours to carry. That truth alone can make speaking less terrifying. Because many people stay silent because they want total control. They want to know exactly how the other person will react. They want to know the exact outcome. They want guarantees. But life does not work that way. There are no guarantees, only choices. And one of the most powerful choices you can make is to stop letting fear silence you. I also want to speak to the people who are good listeners. Listening is beautiful. Listening is valuable. Listening is powerful. But if you are always the listener and never the speaker, you may slowly forget that you have a place in the conversation too. Being thoughtful should not become being invisible. Being kind should not become being unheard. Being calm should not become being erased. You are allowed to have a voice even if you are not the loudest person in the room. You are allowed to interrupt a pattern of silence. You are allowed to say, "Please let me finish." You are allowed to say, "I need to share something." You are allowed to say, "I have been holding this in." You are allowed to speak for your own well-being. And that matters. Because every time you speak for yourself, you reinforce your own worth. That is not selfish. That is healthy. Now let me shift into something motivational, because I want this message to stay with you. You have probably already spent enough time wondering whether your voice matters. It does. You have probably already spent enough time rehearsing what might go wrong. It might not go wrong. You have probably already spent enough time shrinking to make others comfortable. Stop. You do not need to disappear to be accepted. You do not need to go silent to be loved. You do not need to become smaller to be safe. You need to become clearer. You need to become braver. You need to become more willing to speak your truth in a calm and respectful way. And when you do, you may be surprised by what changes. People may respect you more. You may respect yourself more. Your relationships may become healthier. Your mind may feel lighter. Your heart may feel less crowded. Your future may become more visible, because talking is often the first step to transformation. Not the second, not the last, the first. So here's my message to you, from Sophia, with all my heart. Stop hiding inside your own thoughts. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop giving fear the final word. Start speaking. Start expressing. Start telling the truth. Start saying what matters. Start using the voice you already have. Because your life is not meant to be a silent rehearsal. It is meant to be lived out loud. And the world does not need a perfect version of you. It needs the real one, the honest one, the brave one, the one who speaks. Thank you for staying with me.